Sorry, mate, go on.
Sorry, for my work, we just got through finishing up a deployment production meeting, so that lasted a good couple hours. It's always fun.
I'm really glad that we can have people on the call. I think this is more interactive, I guess. It might be a bit easier, so you guys don't have to check out my ugly mug for a good 45 minutes or something. So this is a bit more accessible, I think. There's no third-party software that we can go through. We can just kind of jump in. If anyone's got any questions, we can just ask it at the end. So what I'll do is I'll just give a brief update. I'd like to try and keep these weekly, to be honest. That way, if anyone's interested, you can just drop in and just get a more up-to-date kind of aspect on a couple of projects that we're working on. So this week, most of it was kind of signing a couple of the agreements with the legal teams. We've chosen one firm that we're going to keep on retainer because there's bound to be a lot of research moving on, and we don't necessarily want to pay a legal fee for a lot of the research to be done, because a lot of the stuff that we're doing is groundbreaking. We don't kind of want a lot of the information floating out there. So employing a firm on retainer for the one that's going to be basically publishing the legal opinion for us to take to a lot of these regulation bodies and partners. We kind of want to keep them on retainer just so no other business can essentially hire them for the same information. We're not really looking for loopholes. We're looking for a solid infrastructure that's going to be grounded on solid research, compliance. We want this to be long term. So that's the main reason in that the legal opinion is quite crucial for us. A couple of things that they've said, well, the several firms that we've said that we've spoken to, the brand messaging is really important, not because we're targeting a notoriously difficult kind of demographic, but also there's a couple of issues with essentially a stablecoin returning yield to users. So they've said that there's a couple of things that we have to try and stay away from. So that's another reason why we have to be very careful with the information that we put out officially. So that's one reason why the white paper is taking a little bit long for us to publish, as well as releasing some of the diagrams, or why we can't really record ourselves and then release that publicly. So we really want to try and keep a lot of these discussions informal, speaking to you guys one-on-one, getting your feedback directly. So yeah, the rest of it was just really speaking to marketing and getting some more insight and refinement on a lot of the graphics and diagrams, making things a lot easier to digest, like infographics, possibly pushing out like a one-pager and a PPT that we're essentially going to be circulating at a lot of these conferences. We do actually have a conference on May the 20th. We'll probably announce some more info about that. I think that's more about Vemanti as a whole, not just related to this DeFi initiative. But that's pretty much been the focus for this week. Just really wrapping up the legal teams. We did have another meeting with the development team just to go over kind of the last mile UI fixes, and now we're basically getting into the testing phase. I think we'll probably start opening up probably some beta users probably towards the end of May. So that's going to be really exciting as we roll that out. We are targeting different regions for the platform. North America, obviously, just because we're going to have the on-ramp there, but across Southeast Asia, where we have kind of portfolio companies that we can work with that can complement some of the synergies and the growth. But then we're also going to be targeting Latin America as the kind of scale region. The reasoning for this is because the underbanked and the unbanked, as well as high risk, not just businesses, but high risk merchants over there. It really makes a lot of sense for us to work on that parallel. So North American market is not really going to be a major focus for growth. The market is quite saturated, but we anticipate a lot of people that are going to be using the platform from abroad are going to be using that to kind of transmit funds through the United States. So that's really how we kind of envision the the platform being rolled out. So because of that, we're looking at 4 or 5 different localized versions. So we've had to really nail those down in terms of the growth strategy, and we'll be able to present more to you guys on that. So I'll answer a couple of questions that you guys posted. So someone mentioned about the gold acquisition, not sure compared to USD currently. Okay, it's a great question. So we're not actually going to be using a gold backing asset for the stablecoin, mainly because for this to transact, there's a lot of things that we need to work on, including tokenomics, how to keep that stable compared to the price of gold. It's very different compared to offering it with a fiat backed. The regulation is very different. It's not really a practical form of payment. It's really difficult to have merchants on board with the gold backed stablecoin. It's not ruling it out in the future that we could issue something like that if people need like an asset that they want to save. Tokenized gold is extremely possible for us, and if it does make sense, kind of project operationally and how do you call it? If it does make sense for us, basically, if there's a demand, we can solve it. It's the same thing with the Safe Banking Act. Working with a lot of these high-risk merchants, the payment processing aspect of the platform can definitely facilitate this. We work with different PSPs with different MCC codes, so it's definitely something that we can deploy. We have already been speaking to a couple of cannabis related businesses in terms of processing some of their payments. The volumes are normally range from like 50 million to 100 million per month. They have a lot of wastage with payments being rejected and things like on the ground at POS level. So we know it's a real problem. It's unfortunately not something that can be fixed until it's kind of a recognized problem federally. So it has to be operated on a state-by-state basis. But this is where the platform comes in handy, because we already have the entity that we work with is MSB registered pretty much across all 50 states. I think 48 out of 50. So it's definitely something that we can offer. It's essentially one use of the platform. There's not really anything special that needs to be developed on our end. As long as the merchant and the customer are signed up, through the platform, it's not really an issue. But yeah, unfortunately, in the beginning, at least, for us to onboard merchants and stuff, something like the USD is much easier for them to digest. In terms of it being deflationary, it's not really a problem, because the base rate of the stablecoin is essentially about 10% per year. We hope. We can't guarantee 10% yet, but we are getting there close. But that really just depends on the amount of the capital that's been deployed and how fast it's repaid, and the interest that's repaid on top of that deployment. So even if I think the US dollar deflates about 2% per year, 1.8 or something, so a 10% base yield is pretty good and anti-inflationary anyway. On top of that, as we release the RMBV, JPYV, GBPV, and these other kind of fiat-backed stablecoins, there's a lot of potential for us to arb between a lot of these forex opportunities. Or we can just loan this out to a forex capital fund, and then they can give us an interest rate on whatever the currencies that they trade between the parents. So there's a lot of opportunity for us once we have the USD in reserve and staked, and then we can deploy that capital in a various number of ways. So what it's backed with honestly doesn't really make a difference. The reason why USD was chosen is because of the high level of regulation. Once we jump through all those hoops, it does make earning the community trust a lot easier. And then as we deploy into different currencies, because we already have the registered entity in the US, we're obviously looked at more favorably on these other countries. So it just makes a lot of sense for us to begin with USD. And then I think I saw a couple of questions of people asking about the stock and things. Yeah, I mean, I can't really discuss anything about the stock prices. It's really out of our control. But the to be honest, it's probably got something to do with a lot of people, talking bad about crypto and things. And to be honest, it really drives me crazy. This whole argument about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies being bad for the environment is honestly absolute bollocks. I've been to some extremely large mining facilities in China when I used to live there. The sound is like an airplane hangar. It's just it's just extremely loud. So these sites are way off in the middle of nowhere. They're normally built to rivers or streams. They always have solar power and panels available. They always use some form of renewable energy because they just don't want to pay the fees. Some people are arguing that these government-owned Bitcoin facilities are using coal to fuel it. I've never seen anything like that. I haven't really heard of anything like that. When I was in China, the scene was very much all private, and a lot of these people were off the grid because they don't want to pay the bribes, the fines. They really don't want to do anything like that. One of the reasons that these people have been able to set up such large mining facilities, despite the GPU boom of 2017, is because they essentially were firm believers in the technology, very, very early on. And one of that was because when you can see the constraints that the CCCP, puts on a lot of private businesses over there and individuals, of course you'd want to be off the grid, in a communist country. So it did make a lot of sense for these people to be off the grid. So I really don't understand this sentiment from a lot of these people saying that Bitcoin it pollutes the environment and stuff. I think global mining Bitcoin is something like 150 terawatts every year, and humans waste 50,000 terawatts of energy every year. So I think there's bigger problems than Bitcoin. Not to mention the amount of waste that's produced, the amount of cost in managing fiat and cash money, the amount of risk and danger that's involved. It's just ridiculous, honestly. I think it's just a lot of people that always were kind of against Bitcoin, and then now they're just getting pissy because it jumped up to like 50 grand, 60 grand, etc. So honestly, I think it's just probably a little bit about the negative sentiment. It's completely out of our control. But if people don't have diamond hands, then they shouldn't really be part of the party, right? But yeah, I think that was pretty much it. Does anyone have any other questions that I can answer in the meantime? James, I think.
Yeah, did you want us to put them in the chat, or can we just ask them here?
You can just ask away. If you want to write them in the chat, it's up to you. Either or whatever makes people feel comfortable.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just wondering, I know you kind of spoke about the adoption of, the processes that you guys are looking to put in place. And I believe even you mentioned, or the company has mentioned contracting like firms in order to help with that. Can you kind of speak towards that progress a little bit? Like, have you kind of like got a little bit more movement around that, or like what are your plans as far as marketing to a larger audience? Because I know that you said in North America the adoption rate is not really the market that you're looking to hit as much as it is in the more Eastern Asian countries. So can you just kind of speak towards that a little bit?
Sure. So your question's more about the user adoption, the kind of rollout strategy that we have for USDV and the platform.
Yeah, correct.
Awesome, no worries. Yeah, so we've been speaking to a few marketing agencies. Some of them are relatively overpriced. Once they know that you're a blockchain project, they think they kind of raise the price up, and then once they know that you're working with a public company, the price goes even higher. Similar how you go to a venue, the minute you mention wedding, the price doubles or triples, because they know if you really like the venue, you're not really going to argue about the price. So we've spoken to a few firms, but the price is just kind of overpriced for what they want to do. We're looking for someone that can help us craft the message with the community. So thankfully, because I've been in this space for quite a long time now, the network is quite strong where we can reach out to PR quite easily. The biggest challenge is always getting eyes on it. The second biggest challenge is getting people to trust you. So because we're working with other people's funds, we really can't mess around. We don't want to rush this out and have, discover a mistake a few months down the line. We want it to work from the get-go. We don't want any mistakes, which is one of the reasons why we're really trying to push away from deploying the USDV token as a pool, essentially, in these liquidity providers like Uniswap or UMA, etc. We don't really want any smart contract exploits. That's why we've chosen the security audit partner very, very closely. We're having the technical advisory team review the smart contract multiple times. We have the trust company as the administrator of the stablecoin to make sure that no fiat funds could be pulled. So worst case scenario, thankfully with a little bit of centralization, if someone does manage to steal USDV tokens, through some sort of smart contract exploit, they wouldn't actually be able to redeem them. We can track them with the affiliate link, blacklist, etc., etc. We can replace stolen coins, blah blah blah. So we think that this is a very attractive feature for a lot of these people in underbanked regions. So South America, Southeast Asia. These regions have a lot of economic immigrants. It's extremely difficult to them to access financial services, also to open any form of digital bank account due to capital constraints in the regions. So we see this as a viable alternative. So there are other providers out there. You have TransferWise, you have Cash App, you have Coinbase. The latter two are not exactly global products. They're very much kind of, Cash App is a fiat with a crypto on-ramp, and then you have Coinbase, which is pretty much, mostly crypto-centric. But TransferWise, is a global remittance project. I think last year they made like 304 million. I think the valuation is like 5 billion now. They processed like 60 something billion, I'm sure. So the demand and the proof for the use case is there. But what we envision is that by offering, the same thing that these three different apps can offer, payments, a crypto on-ramp, very easy for global remittance. It's attractive enough in an offer that, once people grow and we have like an affiliate program in place to recruit friends, etc. We think the product will just speak for itself. I mean, the ability to send, $5,000 to another country within seconds, for the price of, less than $1, for example, is a good enough product in itself that we shouldn't really need to use gimmicks or anything in any way. So that answers a little bit more about the rollout strategy. In terms of user adoption, the stablecoin offers a perpetual yield itself. So just by having the stablecoin and staking it, you automatically earn, we aim for a base of 10%. It could go higher, could be much higher, depending on the different deployment strategies that we have. So an anti-inflationary stablecoin that generates yield. I mean, you've seen, I'm sure some people have seen the SafeMoon project go viral, and that was only offering like a 5 to 10% return. And again, this is kind of magic internet DeFi money. So that we know this won't last. We know it's going to crash at some point. So if a service offers the same, that's regulated, that's got a no action from the SEC, it generates the yield from a capital market. People are always going to need to borrow money. COVID's just kind of blew up that bubble a little bit. But people and SMEs and large corporations, everywhere from trade invoice financing to payment factoring to a small cash flow loan to someone using a payday loan, like loans are never going to go away. So the ability for us to deploy that capital in portfolio investment companies and then bring that back to the users, we just cut out the huge middleman, which are these like capital funds in the middle that just take huge cuts and then pass on 0.1 interest to the people who actually own the money. So this is one of the other benefits of DeFi. It is connecting retail investors to these large financial instruments that have previously been inaccessible. Is there anything specific that you wanted to know more about, or was that kind of okay?
No, I mean, you kind of hit on a couple of the areas that I was kind of curious about around, like, the work speaking for itself. I think is one of the areas that you kind of highlighted, where I was kind of wondering, is the need such that, you know, would you need a large kind of appeal in order to, you know, market that? Like, what would that look like? But it seems as though, you know, and I'm so isolated in where I am that I don't have that need. But in the need where you guys are marketing your project, it seems as though there is, you know, a good demand for the project in itself. So it doesn't seem like
There's
you would necessarily. Sorry,
sorry,
go
mate, go
ahead.
on. No. Sorry, please finish. I interrupted you.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I think the need for, you know, having this, you know, transferable currency really is going to really just make tracks in its own way. Like, you know, it's going to pick up traction and people are going to realize that, oh, okay, yeah, I can actually send money like from you know, from one relative to the next. Because I know that's even one of the biggest challenges now, you know, where they have and you know, not even just Latin American countries, but in other countries that are in extreme poverty, they have people that will migrate and go to different countries in order to, you know, be the breadwinner. And that's one of the challenges that I hear is that, you know, it is kind of difficult to even get that logistic sense of sending that money. So I think once, you know, people realize that that is an additional option, that might kind of just um, spread through the grapevine, so to speak. But
Yeah, especially with an affiliate program. For someone that earns $500 a day. Well, first of all, let's look at the options, right? Say it could be anyone that's, as you said, moved away to provide for the family. You know, they could be on, say, a tourism visa. They could be undocumented at all. They could be freelancers that just, you know, live and work in Bali, that are just working remotely. They could be people that have just traveled to another country for work, but they get paid by an American company, so it gets paid in their home bank account. Could be someone paying a freelancer in another country. A lot of people don't necessarily use Fiverr. If they find someone that they like, they'll just kind of, you know, put them on a retainer, so to speak. So the options for these kind of people to send money abroad, back home, pay for a service, you don't really have a lot. So the point I was making before is if you're making $500 a month, and then Western Union is charging you like 15-20% to send your funds by wire because you don't have a bank account, right? Say you get paid by cash. You know, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of your monthly paycheck because you're essentially looking after two households, right? You've got to send the money back home, but then you also, you know, have to provide for yourself in this, you know, foreign country. So that's that's an expensive solution. They can't just go to a bank because maybe they're undocumented, maybe there's capital constraints in the region. Maybe just sending or wire bank transfer is slow. T+3 days, I think, is usual. T+2, 3 days. And then that's also hit with expensive fees. And then sometimes, you know, you've got all these confusing numbers to remember that you have to, if you get one digit wrong, the money's lost forever. If you're looking at another stable coin, then you're dealing with high price volatility. Then maybe it's not really accepted in the region. And then your options within stable coins, you know, like the big three are probably TUSD, USDC, and USDT. USDT is very shady, very gray space. You know, there've been many people have documented how over collateralized it is, under collateralized, I should say, under collateralized USDT is. Deltec, the trust company that USDT uses, they're based in Barbados or Bahamas. I think it's Bahamas, and they essentially were missing several $billions. So when the Bahamas government or DVI government came down and said, you know, where are all these funds that's been declared? They've had to basically say it's offshore somewhere. So they've got this huge disparity between the amount that they're actually custodying and then where the actual funds are. So then you've got USDC, which, you know, Coinbase is doing its own thing. You know, there's nothing wrong with USDC. Obviously, you've got the same kind of redemption issues and their KYC and AML compliance to jump through. They're not really focused on doing anything abroad. As far as we're aware, you know, there are staking programs through DeFi, but it doesn't offer a native yield itself. And then TUSD, which is just very standard, not very liquid. So there's a couple of issues with the other stable coins, you know, not to mention if people are just buying Bitcoin, sending Bitcoin off, then the Ethereum gas fees. The answer to this for USDV is to just publish on multi-chain. Luckily, with the discovery of parachain technology, led by a companies like Kasama or Parity, Polkadot. The only way for these multiple tokenized systems to work, unless they're built, everything is built on Ethereum, which we're seeing the problem now is a congested network. The only way to make all these tokenized platforms work would be through parachain tech. So by issuing USDV on Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, Stellar, Tezos, we kind of avoid this problem of a congested chain. So then if say for example someone wants to send through Ethereum, we can just simply switch over to a Tezos or Stellar and then redeem that on the other side the exact same way as it would. It also allows us to run on different DeFi apps. Loads of different partners can get involved. It just makes a lot of sense for us to to offer a kind of multi-chain product. So say, for example, in South America, we know Stellar's making a big push by running on their chains, by running on their protocol, sorry. We'll essentially be able to capture that market alongside these Stellar anchors. Stellar anchors are on and off ramps that are situated globally. In different regions, they all have different kind of unique use cases, but the majority of them are the same. They're a regulated entity, they run on Stellar, they have the on and off ramp in the region. So it's a great, it makes a lot of sense for a product like USDV to run on something like Stellar. And then Binance Smart Chain, you have all the infrastructure of Ethereum, you don't have the congested network, you have the immediate marketplace and launchpad that offer some development tools and deployment tools for us, but the ability to essentially run on Ethereum native tools and products like MetaMask or Trust Wallet, to us it makes a lot of sense. Because these people don't want to be re-educated on a whole new product. And then Ethereum, just because it's the base standard, having an ERC20 is kind of like a rite of passage for a lot of these projects. But it also means that we can integrate things with Fireblocks for a global internal ledger, and then Ledger, the actual hard wallets and stuff. So that's really. So yeah, basically the options that people have right now are expensive and slow, and then using a stable coin is good, but then you have all the tools and everything to come with it. You have to trust the company, and then offering all these services within one like a platform. We don't have to re-educate people. People can do everything they want in one app.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the biggest part. Really is. And this is probably just the last discussion point, but that I have at least. But I think that's probably just like the best thing that you can provide for like customers and user bases in general is how can I abstract away the work needed for my users in order to allow them ease of use. Like I think that is the key in all of this, because like you said, like there's gas fees, and then there's also the transition of moving from one platform to the next, and how does that look really, and what are all the conversion fees involved with that. But in any way that you can provide like ease of use for your customers, I think that's always going to be a positive, and I think that's always gonna drive the adoption rate up.
Well, yeah, to us, it's not really just trying to make it easy for a user. It's trying to deal with different levels of education. Trying to explain very complex financial instruments and like capital yield strategies to an agricultural cocoa farmer in Peru. He probably wouldn't be able to process a lot of the not just terminology, but the actual concept of using this money to kind of make more money, pretty much. But by doing so, by providing all the kind of confusing stuff within the app and just making it in a few clicks, it's more about the people seeing, I save this money here, this is how much money I'm going to get, rather than trying to explain to someone, okay, we take these funds, we lock it, we deploy it through a capital lending program that's returned through an SPV, and then we offer the returns to you. A lot of the people don't really care almost. If it's very confusing, they just want to see more money hitting their account. So obviously we want to make it, very easy to use, but we're also dealing with multiple languages from the get-go. South American, Vietnamese most likely, and then a native English version that will kind of cover everything. Is to us, it just seems like a good strategy for growth and adoption. They're the two biggest challenges that we face as we deploy. one of the points that I said before about the product kind of selling itself, doesn't mean that we don't have to put the effort into marketing. But we're very confident that once people see the ease of use of, joining onto the network, essentially, making their own wallet and account, and then being able to manage everything from within one space, virtually on, any device, essentially. To us, that's a huge selling point. If you look at a lot of families in Asia that want to send funds, to students that are studying abroad in the UK or the States, they're hit with expensive fees because they send, a few $1,000s every month. But being able to send, funds instantly, we're talking like T plus a few seconds, not like T plus 3 days. So in the event of emergencies, it's extremely useful. But we still have to have the AML compliant processes. We're most likely going to have to hire a compliance officer to govern and sign off on a lot of the transactions. Of which an agency is most likely going to be able to provide for us. But we're speaking to a couple of consultants now that can help us set up an SPV so that we can remain compliant, because that is the number one concern for us at the moment. When we partner up with a lot of these on and off ramps in different regions, the benefit is that they are already regulated in their countries of operation. So as long as we just focus on the US, working with these partners will provide a much clean path to like regulated deployment. So that's another reason why we think that it's going to be very difficult for another company to copy us, essentially. There are reasons why the TransferWise doesn't sell Bitcoin, and Coinbase isn't focused on global remittance, because a lot of these companies are essentially walking into regulation. However, with USDV and Vemanti, because we're already a public company and regulated, we're able to walk out of regulation into a deregulated space much more easily. At least much less of a headache and with much less scrutiny than a lot of these companies that are trying to enter regulation are coming. So yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
No worries, mate. No worries. Does anyone have any other questions while I'm
on? Warren, I have a question. You mentioned agreements or kind of cooperation with banks in Vietnam, Brazil, and US, if I'm not mistaken. Can you explain what would be the role of the banks?
Yeah, so one of them would be to govern the transactions that are operating domestically. So the wouldn't be the banks in Brazil. I think it's like a regulated PSP that operates in a few different regions. So they'd be able to actually process a lot of the transactions on the ground. So they govern the transactions and they hold us accountable. They essentially act as a compliance officer. Ideally, we're going to be working with them to handle a lot of the communication domestically. We're not really experts in the South American region, for example, so it makes sense for us to partner with someone that is experienced at working with people on the ground. What we offer them in exchange is essentially a global network of financial rails that they can then take advantage of. So there is mutual benefit to both parties that are being involved. So yeah, the main roles would be the governance and signing off on the transactions on the ground to help us remain compliant, but also being able to provide liquidity in the on and off ramps. So that means that we're not pulling an unneeded amount of capital from the reserve to kind of keep these liquid pools managing at all times on the ground. We just need partners to be able to agree to issue and redeem, or essentially exchange or sell the USDV token, and then we'll be able to redeem that with those partners. So rather than us working with, say, 1 million users all trying to issue and redeem, that would really slow kind of our operations down on the trust side. So working with these banks and these financially regulated partners, in domestic regions, they could take a lot of the workload off us, essentially.
Right.
No worries. Yeah, if anyone asks any questions and they don't feel that I answer it fully, feel free to ask me to clarify or anything. More than happy to. The whole reason of these calls is to have interaction with you guys, give you an update on what, where we're up to, and kind of hear your feedback.
Hey, Warren, I just want to say thanks for doing these calls. I mean, I think, all the shareholders really appreciated just having this insight to what is going on behind the scenes. For me, it was really cool to have. But I just had a quick little question, just kind of about like the Vemanti portfolio itself and how USDV would be used to, I guess, part of the ecosystem of the 10 always talks about of integrating the stablecoin within the Vemanti ecosystem. I was wondering if Vemanti had plans to expand its portfolio of companies within Southeast Asia in order to help expand the adoption of USDV. Is that something you could speak to or not really?
Yeah, so Tan's always on the phone, pretty much. He's always jumping from call to call. He's always listening to new companies, companies that essentially come on the radar. So I'm also associated with a venture capital firm in Japan. So there's always, exciting hot companies coming out of the Southeast Asian region. Vietnam is without a doubt one of the most explosive right now. So the companies that are already in the portfolio for Vemanti complement USDV, and most of it is the interest generating, like the yield generating aspect of USDV. So we know that through the companies like Fundit and eLoan, they have a huge demand for being able to take loans, collateralized loans out. The only thing that they miss is the capital to scale. The price to get liquidity through traditional finance is not only difficult, it's also very expensive, and it doesn't really make it worthwhile, against the growth of the company, for example, because then you're kind of subject to a lot of this liquidity, extortionate rates and, highly regulated markets and stuff. So being able to pull the capital from the USDV reserve and deploy that to these portfolio investment companies, it means that Vemanti, since Vemanti has a board seat in these kind of lending companies, they have a lot of control and a lot of insight into the company and the operations. They can also vote on priority payments for the debts and the liabilities that are created through this kind of scheme. So it makes a lot of sense for Vemanti because the portfolio investments are already there. Because they have essentially, I don't want to say ownership, but because they have a lot of authority within these companies. And then the liquidity comes from, within the ecosystem itself, it's very easy to make sure that the funds are returned and then deployed to users, in this yield generating prospect. In terms of expansion and growth of new companies, I do know that Tan is always speaking to different companies. So I'm not too sure if any new companies will join kind of the ecosystem soon. But in terms of USDV, we are speaking to companies that we are going to work with directly. If Tan takes an interest in some of those companies and he sees it benefits vertical integration, that's something that Tan can make the decision on in the future. And then, as soon as I get more info, I'm more than happy to tell you guys. But yeah, I'm not the best person for the insight into new partners being acquired or kind of joining the ecosystem. But in terms of partnering and working with, I can tell you that we've been speaking to quite a few. Some of those are not only based in Vietnam, these are kind of global. There's a lot of excitement from a lot of companies. There's some projects that have some really old school veteran players, some that aren't really released yet that we're speaking to, which would be really exciting for us to have kind of that gold stamp of approval, especially in the crypto space. But yeah, the existing partners are more yield generating and deployment. A couple of the banking partners help us regulate and kind of provide us a lot of these on-off ramps on the ground. But yeah, I think that answers.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Warren. Appreciate the answer.
No worries, but no worries. Any other questions, guys? How do you guys feel about this USDV project? Because obviously I'm so close to the project, I kind of tend to forget how much you guys are aware and how much you guys know about it. What's the kind of general feeling? Is it still shrouded in mystery a little bit?
I guess I'll speak to it. I think for me, it's exciting having the ability to gain, like you said, close to 10% APY on what is essentially US currency. I mean, you haven't seen those rates given by banks in decades in the United States. In regards to like the shroud of mystery, I think it is kind of mysterious in a way, because I feel like it's one of those things where it's like you and Tan were saying, it's like focusing on the developing world, like, in places like South America and Southeast Asia, like the economies there. So it's kind of like, I guess I can't really relate being based in, on the East Coast of the United States. It's a little foreign for me, I guess, to like feel these problems. I recognize they exist, like the idea of the foreign remittance. And I understand there's a lot of potential there, but I guess it doesn't hit as close to home to me, if that makes sense. No one I know is sending money across borders all the time.
No, it's totally fine. We're not expecting a lot of people to. We're not expecting a lot of people to grasp the concept itself. It is very complicated, the kind of tokenomic structure, which is why it's taken so many meetings with so many different legal consultants, essentially, to kind of portray it and explain to them, this is what we want to do. We always get a different answer from each legal partner. So we've had to choose one that actually understands and can answer and tell us, no, this cannot be done. Yes, this can be done if this and this are in place. And then also, as we said before, the brand messaging, we really don't. There's a few things that we don't want to get wrong. We don't want to give you guys misinformation. We don't want to give you guys something that might change in the future. But then also, with the legal consultant stating explicitly, we have to be very careful on how we portray and how we explain the project. Just because we don't want something to come back and bite us, as soon as we launch, or a few months or anything like that. We want this project to be running for 10, 15 years. I think a comment I made when the group was pretty early was, it's great that these projects and these other, somewhat competitors are making $1 million in a year, but we'd like to make $1 million every year, and we'd like to share that profit with people that, believe in the project. So for us, it's more about, long term. So we really believe that the service we're offering is not just competitive, but it's also market pushing, market leading. The technology itself is, like how I like to explain it, is it's not a blockchain project, it's a fintech project. It just happens to use blockchain to solve a lot of the problems that financial markets face. With the growth of DeFi, kind of offering these crazy APYs, we know the demand is there. A lot of people have been using Bitcoin and stable coins to kind of do kind of gray remittance, for the past 3-4 years. We know that the demand is there for economic immigrants to want to send money back. But, a lot of these people get scammed, or, they get hit with, accounts being frozen because the MCC PSP isn't properly regulated or registered. So there's a lot of difficulties for the companies in the space as well. And that's what we've, hoped to kind of resolve. In terms of the monetization for Vemanti, Vemanti takes a relatively small cut from the stablecoin. Like the reserve, it's a very small operating fee. The majority of it is returned to users. We want people to feel the benefit of it for essentially powering this ecosystem. A lot of the monetization for Vemanti is going to come from the remittance, the payments, and the essentially, the exchange or the P2P trades, essentially from within the platform. The ability for someone to walk in a store and pay with Apple Pay, a lot of people thought it was groundbreaking, but China's had this technology since like 2011. I've seen 75-year-old, women walk into a store and pay with the phone, and then I've seen, a 6-year-old girl walk in and pay with a watch. So the technology's there, it's being used. We can see the future use case and growth. WeChat and Alipay have given us great case studies to, and many companies have tried to replicate these in other countries in the West. It's just never taken on because there's never been a reason to. But imagine walking around with this kind of digital wallet on your phone, but in the meantime, you're earning this interest. To us, that makes a lot of sense. Sure, it's not as attractive as these, 500% APY projects, that only last, a week. And then, the 1 hour it's 200%, the next hour it's 20%. It fluctuates all the time. And then to get these rates, you have to stake a pairing like USDC and Ethereum into a liquidity provider. You get an LP token, then you take that, you stake it, you earn interest on that, and then you end up with like 4 or 5 different altcoins that you essentially pool. You're reliant on a lot of different working parts to earn that yield. It should be much simpler than that. There are projects like Zapper.fi, which makes these yield farming a couple of clicks away. But even then, you're reliant on this project doing the due diligence on those other projects. You're not really doing the research yourself. So we want to take a lot of this headache away from, all of these kind of aspects. Another thing is that we're, even though that we're only offering the 10%, it's from a very reliable market. It's not only traditional finance market, capital lending, but it's also companies that Vemanti has, a very authoritative stake in, at least a board seat in these companies. So, there's transparency from every single angle. So the monetization, for Vemanti on the stablecoin is really the incentive, for Vemanti for USDV is essentially just to power the ecosystem of, the payments and the remittance and the trades, etc. We really want to be passing a lot of these back onto the users and the community. So being able to pull 10%, reliably and efficiently, 10%, for example, and then giving that to users is a strong incentive for this platform to essentially take off. As I mentioned before, SafeMoon, I think we're offering 5% or 10%, and that seems to have gone viral, but essentially, it's a digital Ponzi. At some point, it's going to have to crash, and a lot of the value is being placed on this kind of shitcoin that's being pushed alongside it. There's no regulatory reason for that. It's just a simple cash grab. If we wanted to monetize the hell out of it, we could just deploy a governance token and we could deploy a utility token, and there wouldn't be any use case for it. We have spoke about issuing similar things later in the future, but because of the regulation right now, it doesn't really make sense. But it's not to say that we can't invest in partners that want to join the ecosystem and then manage, these kind of, DAO, like a decentralized autonomous organization network, or a truly fully, DeFi project from within the ecosystem. That there's no reason that we couldn't do something like that in the future. But for Vemanti, it's much more than just a simple cash grab. It's about providing these people in these regions a very reliable solution. Another thing that might be able to help understand is, imagine if every single state that you went across, you had to pay like a transfer fee. It would be very expensive just to send money from New York to California. We see a lot of these high-risk merchants having difficulty processing card payments, not only because they get rejected more than 75% of the time, but also these stores have like capital constraints themselves. They're only supposed to be selling or operating at a certain capacity. So you end up with, dispensary owners having huge problems, like Tony Montana problems, where they're stuffing cash into the walls and all sorts of crazy things. These people want to operate legally, but the demand is just so strong that they have an obligation to customers, to kind of operate. Being able to work with high-risk merchants in the US, would probably be a bit easier to digest as a US citizen. But the remittance thing, yeah, I can see how not many people would see the potential in that. So maybe focusing on maybe the marketing for that, maybe the brand messaging for those regions, like the North American region, would be something more along the lines of focus on the digital banking services, the high-risk merchant payments for businesses. Something like that might be more interesting. Also, the fiat on and off ramps to crypto. The ability for a grandmother to make the account and then buy Bitcoin, from a pension is pretty phenomenal. It's about providing these financial instruments and financial access to these complex services, very easily through an app. But offering these US-based services to the globe, because the US is such a heavily regulated and compliant market, being able to offer this, globally, including like FDIC insurance for accounts, is very attractive, especially if you look at the other competition out there, which is either non-existent or terrible technology or limited financial rails or deregulated. You're dealing with people's funds, and $500 for someone in Ecuador is a lot of money, for someone that only earns a few $100s a month, as we were saying before. So yeah, we're really excited.
Yeah, I think I could speak for all the shareholders and everyone who's been following Vemanti to say that we're all super excited too. I guess I'll let someone else talk before I saw Joe Segredo saying something.
Hey Warren, a newer shareholder here, but you had some interesting aspects and thoughts there that I hadn't previously considered before, and I'll give you a little background. But I actually used to work at an e-commerce company, and we sold hosting services to them. And a lot of our stores, entrepreneurs that open stores we were essentially a smaller version of Shopify for just to simplify it for the rest of the people listening. There was a lot of people that came to us that wanted to start these higher risk businesses, they were selling firearms, or they were selling like CBD oil or medical marijuana, or like the gummies that are getting out there now. But that's an interesting aspect that and a lot of these people did have problems finding payment processors because you could just imagine becoming a high risk payment processor has all sorts of more regulation rules, and there's more risk on the business owner because you have less people to work with, and that this does provide, like you're saying, like a unique step forward for that industry, and especially as we see kind of a more liberalization of a lot of those products, particularly around CBD and cannabis and marijuana. I think that's going to be there's really a lot of room there, just on that part. And then something you said a little while back also made me think of another thing too. So I currently work in finance right now, and I'm not sure how many people are aware, but playing the currency markets is something that wealthy business owners do all the time. If I own let's say manufacturing shop in Europe and I have goods that I'm selling to America, well, I'm buying futures and I'm putting places on the different currencies, so that way if my shipment goes through and if there's some type of, let's say, political situation, I'm covered. So this is something that that wealthy business owners have been doing for a long time, but now we're getting more access to, and this has the potential to give the same type of leverage to more everyday consumers, and to actually utilize more currencies through stable coins, through different asset-backed coins, and it's really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's one of the main difficulties for the high-risk PSPs is they'll gain some traction, and then they'll be shut down at a federal level. And obviously, being offshore, you can't operate a PSP within the US. You can't interact with US citizens in any format. So these companies will pop up. They'll last about 6 months. They'll process hundreds of millions. So they prove the demand, but then they get shut down once they start to get some serious traction. So we want to be able to offer a method that is it won't be shut down, essentially, because we don't want to do anything wrong. One of the biggest issues is the PSPs. They'll register as an MCC payment code. So when you pay for something with Visa or MasterCard, the PSP has an MCC code, and that could be something like agricultural supplies, or it could be food, perishable goods, clothing, different levels, digital services like video games or cryptocurrency, yada, yada, yada. They'll register as a different MCC code, and then they'll go to these, high-risk merchants, pawn, casino, online casinos or dispensaries, and then someone will flag, or someone will run a chargeback, and then that essentially gets escalated until the transactions are being scrutinized. And it's a big problem, because that is essentially one of the few solutions that they have, is to register fraudulently a different MCC code, and then operate a different kind of transactions as to what they're declaring.
Right.
So
Right.
the use of stablecoins is we're not subject to MCC codes or anything. You know, someone buys something in a stablecoin, you know, it's not really looked at a federal level. You know, they're not buying marijuana, they're not paying for an adult entertainment site. Gambling's a bit tricky because there are rules against that. That's not something that we really want to, you know, go down that road without more legal consultation. But, you know, in terms of a high risk, I use, you know, quotations. In terms of a high risk merchant, you know, they're essentially a business owner. You know, that first and foremost, you know, they need access to financial services, you know, as much as an economic immigrant needs a more efficient way of sending money. The DeFi space, as you mentioned before, about a lot of these financial plays, is putting the fintech in the hands of the people. You know, we're just basically digitalizing a lot of these financial instruments and making it more easily accessible. I say easily accessible, you know, because there is still a lot of messing around with these yield farming projects. If someone wants to do that to potentially get 100% APY, you know, that's fine. But if they make one mistake, they could end up losing more than what they actually invested. So it's a very difficult balance that people have to face. You know, you have to either commit 1,000%, or you have to, you know, kind of just look at the stand by the leeway and just watch kind of all these projects, you know, go up in smoke or get successful for a few months and then back down. That's not something that USDV intends to do. So there's a lot of people that also ask us, you know, how do we monetize USDV? And as I said before, you know, we only take operational costs from USDV, because we intend to publish a GBP backed, you know, RMB backed, Japanese yen backed, you know, all these different currencies. We want to be able to offer Forex Hub between a lot of these different liquidity pools. So we wouldn't manage that ourselves. You know, we're actually going to be speaking to a couple of firms later on. We've actually got a call later today with an Asian-based capital deployment firm. I think that starts pretty soon, so I'm going to have to jump off onto that call. But I'll have more information next week. So if anyone's got any questions, you know, feel free to post them in the group. I'm more than happy to answer them when I get around to them. But how does this time work for everyone? Because you know, we can always have another call next week, same time.
Yeah, it works for me. I can't speak for everyone else, but I like the Thursday nights for me are fine.
Good. All right.
Yeah, this is informative.
Yep, perfect. Well,
Perfect.
Wicked.
thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Really appreciate your feedback. I'll look forward to speaking to you in the group.
Thank you, Warren.
All right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.